Welcome back to The Conversation Continues with Adam Royalty. We received so many great questions from you, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as possible in this section. You up for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Okay, first question that came in. Is design thinking similar to any other kind of innovation processes?
Yeah, so there's a lot of innovation processes out there, and I'll talk about a couple right now. And I'll say that there's a lot of overlap. So I'm thinking specifically about Lean Launchpad, which is used for entrepreneurship, but also corporate entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship, and another one, Agile, like an Agile development process. And so those three, Agile, Lean Launchpad, design thinking, are often talked about together. And so ways they overlap in that they are all really iterative. So Lean Launchpad is about continuing to sort of pivot and develop ideas. Agile is about creating products and like getting feedback and having rapid cycles. And design thinking is also about iteration. So they have a combination there. They all involve the customer in some way, getting feedback from the customer. I think one thing that design thinking has a little bit more of a focus on is, again, we go back to this idea of understanding the needs. Like, what does the customer really want? And how can I be inspired to come up with new ideas? Right. So a lot of innovation processes are great when you feel like you've got like a pretty solid direction and you want to move quickly and still keep people involved. Design thinking can be especially great when you're saying like, let's potentially move into a new direction or be open for change, which is certainly key for innovation.
Great, great. All right, next question. Is this design approach good for SMEs operating at a traditional industry also?
Yeah, so a lot of people will say, oh, design's great for like a startup trying to do something new where you kind of by default have to be innovative, or for a big organization that has a lot of resources to potentially drive big innovations. But I mean, some of the biggest changes that we've seen are for people who, again, want to be more connected with the customer, and especially if you're small or you're medium, like that, it might be a little bit easier to have that connection with the customer because there's not a huge bureaucracy or just a huge organization you have to go through. I think the other thing that's important when they say traditional industry, and oftentimes that question comes up, well, like we know what we're doing, so why do we need to do anything innovative? And I'd say there's a couple responses to that. One, you can always get a little bit better at what you do, and so design doesn't have to be used as an engine for the big breakthrough, but it can be like, how do we kind of incrementally get better? But it's also the case, especially, traditional industries are always going to be challenged, right? So design is a great way, even if you're, on the smaller side, being aware of where's the industry going, because you're really being inspired by people and their lives, what they're focused on, and what they're struggling with. And if you tap into something that a customer is struggling with, even in a traditional industry, but it might lead to a shift in the industry, or might lead to industries coming together. If you're aware of that and keep your eyes open, like you're going to be ahead of the game when change starts to come.
Great, great. All right, next question. I'm in the communications PR space. How can design thinking be applied to communication strategy and execution?
Yeah, so there's a lot to that, right? So there's communication, strategy, and so part of the when I hear communication, I think about, well, there's an audience, right? And then, how do you be aware of the audience? And I think the way we talk about needs, the way we talk about doing the explore phase fits thematically what people in communication do. But just really being really sure of the message you're broadcasting and how people are receiving that is one thing. And also this idea of strategy. We'll get to execution in a second. So strategy is something that we didn't talk a lot about in the first 30 minutes, but really, how are you as an organization, how are you positioning yourself? How are you even framing your own challenges? So going back to that reframe phrase. So there's a lot of work around design, trying to understand what are our core competencies, what are our, we even do a little exercise that's fun called the 8-word mission statement that really helps solidify what are we here to do, and who are the people that we are trying to address. So that's a way to kind of frame a strategy. Also the way you do that in design, because we move so nimbly, you can kind of like try on different strategies without going through a whole, 3 weeks, strategic reorg, but really like saying, what would it mean if we tried on this strategy? What if our 8-word mission was different? How would we look different? So that's one way to play with strategy. And then I think in terms of execution, a lot of that's depending on context, but I think it kind of goes back to one of the things we mentioned earlier about how do you provide that feedback loop? How do you, how do you get the customers as part of your data collection so that you're making decisions continuously, maybe not just off a one-off, but like build in that continuous feedback in a way that gets at how are they really internalizing your message on like a real human level.
Right.
So it's a little bit of an overview, but I
but
think there's a
sounds like a really important key point there is, the messaging is enormously important, all right, for the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like,
And sometimes your messaging sounds different through yours than through your customers'
and
ears.
someone in,
all know that.
Exactly, and someone in communications PR would obviously
Really
understand
know
that
it, yeah.
concept. So.
I think they can really dive in. I think that's a really interesting challenge, really interesting space to play with design.
All right, the next question. What about if you're getting the feedback from, the customers, but the people who are in charge, seniors in your organization, don't respond to
Yeah.
that feedback? How do you go about it then?
Yeah, that's an exhale
we need to
question.
tell them directly what do you do in that
It's a
situation.
really great question. So I want to do design, but people, the people at the leadership don't support it or might not understand it. And so there's lots of different avenues you can take, and I want to just give an overview now. But one of the things to do is to really understand leadership. Like what gets leadership excited and why? Like why might they not like design, or what don't they? What maybe disconnects them? And so part of that is actually using the design tools like Explore. What sorts of information, what kind of data do leaders respond to? And you might be surprised. Like maybe they don't like the term design, but they don't really understand what it gets at.
Right.
So that's one thing, understanding what leaders, like what their disconnect is.
Right.
And then another way to do it is say, you can do a big investment in design, or you can do little starts. You could say like I'm going to do a few interviews with customers, along with my normal work, and I'm just going to include this idea of needs. I'm going to include some customer insights, and then when you start sharing the work, across the organization, you can say, and here are the customers that I've talked to. Here's what they said, like specific quotes, specific pictures. It's funny. What that can do. And if you're doing a presentation, you say, here are customers that I spoke to, here's what they said, here's how I interpreted what they said. I didn't just do what they said, what they expressed, but I internalized what they said and made decisions off of that. If you can show that, then I think that's a big buy-in, right? Because leaders aren't going to argue with their customers. They're not going to say, like, oh, we don't care what our customers say. No one would
We
say
hope
that.
not. Yeah,
We
exactly.
hope not.
Exactly.
They might say, well, we're not going to do literally what they said,
Right.
which is great. No one's saying.
Right.
We're not saying do literally what customers are saying. We're saying be inspired by what they do and really understand them deeply. Like that's a no-brainer. So if you can express, we understand our customers deeply and understand insights from that, then don't worry about selling design. Share that and get people excited about that.
Seems there's another question here. How do you begin to introduce design thinking into an organization? So that you were talking about, managing up.
Yeah.
Now this is maybe managing down
Yeah.
question. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So again, you can do it both ways. Like you can start from a groundswell, but as a leader, I think it's if you go kind of top down, there's a couple things to do. One is start very simply and say, okay, what are the elements of design that fit with my organization, my group?
Right.
So for example, some organizations, they're kind of naturally into making and building. And so for them, it makes sense to lean more on prototyping. Hey, we're going to do these rapid iterations. We just talked about communication. They might have a natural affinity towards people and talking to people. So they might expand design by doing more of these explore techniques, more interviewing. So starting with what fits with your culture and growing from there. I think the other thing is modeling the behavior. So if you're a leader, asking, okay, well, a simple question you can ask is, how many customers have you talked to and what did you learn? Those a couple questions. It doesn't take a long time to do that. But if you ask that repeatedly, people are going to respond. And if you demonstrate, like, well, here's a customer I talked to and here's what I learned, you're modeling that behavior, right? So the short answer is kind of just get started on a small level. I think what the nuance there is modeling the behavior and ask for that information, ask for the data that pops out of design.
And also, I would say, the core values that you spoke about, to have
Yeah.
that somewhere where people are, I've said this many times in many webinars, I really believe in sort of a North Star.
Yeah.
I really, that when people are, I'm not sure what I'm doing, there's a vision, there's a
Yeah.
North Star, there's a core value that we're going towards.
Yeah.
So that, I think can helpful, and you had those two core values there. So,
Yeah. Yep.
it works. All right. This is a great question because there was one of the sections that we talked about that I thought was so interesting, which is that culture shift. So any techniques on reframing?
Yeah, so there's a lot around reframing. It's one of my favorite things to do because it's, we mentioned earlier, it's like one of the hardest things to do. People don't like to sit in that reframe.
Right.
And so, some of these techniques you have to like try out and practice. So needs is one. There's also, we've done reframing, and there's a video by Charles and Ray Eames, great designers. It's called Powers of 10. There's a neat video out there which is a little dated but still fun. But it's really looking at a problem at different lenses. So you might say, okay, well, what's the problem that maybe this team is having? Let's say you're doing software for teams that have to manage, clients or something. So you say, well, what's the problem that maybe this individual on the team's having? Zoom out. What's the issue the team's having? Zoom out. What's the issue the organization's having? And then you can zoom in likewise.
Right.
So it's a way to look at a problem from different lenses.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
You could look at a problem and say, how's this issue affecting us over the next day, the next month, the next year?
Oh,
and
that's-
kind of doing that all at once helps you kind of tease apart the problem. And maybe you decide, actually, there's a problem that's going to affect us long term that we're not even addressing.
Right.
Let's maybe reframe what we're working on.
So those 3 steps are looking at it. What's the first?
Yeah, so looking at choosing a problem and then zooming out.
Right. And what are the
That's
3
right.
zooms?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what you do. So
Right,
it could be, if it's zooming on people, then zooming out on different people. So like a team,
Right.
a department, an organization.
Okay.
And then you can zoom in on a specific person, like how they spend their time
Right.
every day.
Maybe depending on where the problem lies.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And you can
Okay.
also zoom on time.
Right.
So zoom out in terms of time, zoom in and out. So.
Right. That's great. Okay, that because I think to me when I look at this, this journey that we'll talk about a little bit later,
Yeah.
that reframing is paramount
Yeah.
to the success of this journey. I mean,
Yeah.
to identify a problem, to explore it, but then to reframe it is really kind of you're going to stop right there if that doesn't work well.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
is great advice. Thanks.
Great.
All right. Next question. What are some good general questions used to identify the needs of these stakeholders or your customers?
Yeah, so we teach multiple modules on how you can do interviewing, even observation, how you can test prototypes with people. And so I don't have the time to get into the full nuances there, but a couple of quick pieces of advice, and we always do this in our intros, but going for like specific questions. So, let's say you're doing a project around transportation, and you say, well, okay, well, what's your commute like usually? Usually so broad, people have a hard time kind of filling that in. Usually I get on the subway and I go here. But if you say something very specific, like, what was your commute today? They can tell you a story about it and get some nuances. Or what was your most memorable commute in the last month?
Right.
So now you're getting some specific examples that you can then ask follow-up questions.
Right.
So going for specifics are good. And then we say this over and over again, but like asking why. So when you ask why, you understand more about the person and why they're making the decisions that they're making. So like, so you were upset when the car didn't work, when the train broke down. Well, why was that the case? And because in your head you're feeling out, well, of course they're upset when the car breaks down, the train breaks down, they're late. But if you understand something about because I have a family commitment and that's when I stress out the most.
Right.
Then you're understanding something more about this person and it's the fact that they bring themselves to a problem, right? They're not going to experience transportation. Like how they experience transportation depends on the context that they're in and how they're thinking about things. So when you ask why, you understand more about the person and their decision-making process, which then in terms gives you insight into how you can make decisions.
Right. Specificity.
Yeah.
It's got to be. It can't
Yep.
be broad terms. At
Yeah.
least maybe it can start there, but it must
Sure.
not end there.
Sure,
Yeah.
and it's your job to pull it down to specificity.
Right, right. And people want to talk specifically
Exactly.
because it's actually, I think, would be easier to talk
Yeah.
in less vague terms
Yeah.
to the customer. The customer can actually give you very specific.
It's like a lot of it, it's funny how many people are natural storytellers, and so all you have to do is get people telling their stories and then listen. It really is.
Ask
it
the
comes
right
down to that.
questions, right? All right. Last question before our final one. How do you use design thinking for policy work?
Yeah, that's a good question and one that a lot of people are asking. So, again, zooming out, if we're going to do our powers of 10, a lot of the principles are the same thing, right? Being have a focus on citizens and having focus on what are the real needs, right? So that stuff stays the same, which you'd think would be just how we do policy, but it isn't always the case. So having a really strong understanding of the needs that people have. It's also the case people will say, well, part of design thinking is moving quickly, and how do you prototype a policy like that's so big? It has to go through, if it's a state level, community level, like that takes a long time. But there are ways you can prototype policies on very small scale. So, let's say we have a policy around health and eating and how do you label foods? Well, that's something you can actually try. You can say, look, how might we label foods differently? Well, get some of your friends or get an organization or an office building or something and say, go to the cafeteria and start experimenting with how do we label the foods there at the cafeteria, right? And what are some small policies we can put in place over a week or a couple of days or whatever to really explore. Right. So it's funny because as you get into design, you start seeing opportunities to do experimentations in ways that aren't daunting, but that will give you a lot of information. So that's one way.
And policy is people.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, policy is people.
I should have said that. That's
sorry.
That was a great way. It summed it up there.
Feel free to use it. But policy, in any of these questions, it all seems the core thing you're talking about is it comes back to people, right? So we have one final question here, and it's just maybe really quickly if you want to run through it. Could you just please repeat the 4 steps that we talked about? And I think this is very important.
So when we teach design, again, as a scaffold at the beginning, we do explore, reframe, generate, and prototype. Right, so you're exploring a problem, really trying to understand how people are experiencing it. You're reframing the problem based off of what you just learned. Then you're generating ideas. Okay, well, what are different ways to solve this?
Right.
And we're prototyping things quickly. So, explore, reframe, generate, prototype.
And I'm coming from the view, I think reframe is one of the most important steps of that, although I think you'd probably say they're all equally important.
I think one thing that you're really tapping into is the fact that I think reframe is the one that we do the least, but can have the most impact, right? Because it's something that can help organizations have a better sense of what is a meaningful problem they want to solve versus spending time on problems that might not matter or might be a little bit off the mark.
Right. And again, that energizes me. I mean, it would energize me if that's what we were really doing well. So thank you so much again for being with us today. And we'd like to thank all of you who joined us today for this webinar with Adam Royalty.